Welcome to the Online Business Launchpad podcast. I'm your host, Trudy Rankin, and today I've got Brent Zahradnik with me. He is the founder and CEO of AMZ, and he says AMZ, but it's AMZ Pathfinder, so it's probably AMZ, it's an Amazon advertising agency that works with brands just basically to help them optimize their advertising presence on Amazon, increase conversion rates, help with content optimization, and also to help with paid traffic that comes through from places like Google and things like that. So that comes through to their Amazon product catalog. Now, he's a pretty good sized business. He's got a team and they work with 65 plus brands, like all over the place, all over the world. And they manage around $2 million a month in ad spend. So it's a bit of a chunky business that he's got and that he's running. He's got over a decade of experience in e-commerce and just the whole e-commerce industry. And I've asked him if he would share some tips with you today, especially if you're somebody who's thinking about getting started with advertising on Amazon for your e-commerce products, or if you're somebody who's actually had a crack at it and it just hasn't worked the way that you thought it would. So Brent, welcome.
Hey, Trudy, thanks for having me on. And I don't care if it's AMZ or AMZ, as long as you don't say Amazon, because that has not been cleared by their legal team. So don't do that one, whatever you do.
Don't do that one, even though everybody sees AMZ and thinks it's, Amazon. So I have, for our listeners, you won't know this, but this is our second take at trying to record this podcast. We got all the way through a most wonderful discussion about what Brent does and how he arrived at where he's at. And we got to the very end, and I thought I was turning the recording off, and I'd actually turned it on. So we had missed out recording that whole conversation. So this is take two.
That was practice. That was just practice.
It was definitely practice. So I just wanted to thank you very much for being here. And just to set the scene a little bit, can you just tell people a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you actually started the business that you...
Sure. So I'm from the US originally, which most of your audience can probably hear in my voice pretty evidently. I'm from a state called Pennsylvania near the East Coast. And when I was living in Florida in 2015, I was working in a totally unrelated industry to online advertising, although I had a couple of years of experience at that point doing that. I met a friend in that industry who was selling on Amazon, and he had a pretty clever arbitrage because there were some factories that had not done very well in the economic downturn in 2008, 2009 in the US, but they were manufacturing, they'd been retooled and they were manufacturing something else. And he had found a connection with them and was basically wholesaling and taking those products and selling them on Amazon. And he came to me the one day and said, "Hey, there's advertising on Amazon. Can you help me with this?" And my first response to that was actually, "There's advertising on Amazon? I have no idea that existed." I had only been familiar with Google, and even back then, actually, Facebook wasn't really a big thing. So that was 2015 I'm talking about here, but I had worked in the ad industry for a couple of years prior to that. And essentially, we started to get like really incredible results because in those days, the cost per click, what's called like CPC in the advertising space, was very low. It was like incredibly low. I think our clicks were anywhere from 5, 6, 7, 8 cents, like US cents, not dollars, cents. And the products that he were selling were $89 to $90 for the flagship one. So even with 10 clicks in one conversion, that's like an incredible return on ad spend, or like ROAS. I'm throwing out some terms here that are real common in the advertising space. And so that was like an eye opener. I decided this is a market that I could absolutely get into. And so I started consulting for other people like right away. And in the early days of Amazon advertising, the best place to find clients and people to connect with was mostly Facebook groups, like those related around certain tools or Amazon podcasts. And so I spent a lot of time on those groups, basically just talking to people and helping them. And then eventually I would send them a direct message, or they would send me a direct message and say, "Hey, your like answers are great. Why don't you like help me with my account?" And at the time, of course, I had no idea what I was doing. I undercharged drastically, and it took on way more work than I could reasonably do. And I was working a part-time job at the time too, to try to stay afloat. So those are some long days. But eventually I got to the point where in 2016, I went full time on that. I started to travel around the world a bit, and I hired a couple people part time and then eventually full time. So that's the genesis story of Pathfinder, if you will.
So you basically slowly bootstrapped your business and built it up. And I want to just chat a little bit about your team a little bit. You said you hired a couple of people sort of part-time. And based on what I said in the beginning, you've got a pretty chunky agency. You want to just talk a little bit about your team and how you went about that process of getting people to help you with.
Sure. So we're about 20 people now, including myself. And that's actually a fairly comfortable size, I think, for an agency. We've been up to the mid 20s, and I think we were actually overhired at that point. We've scaled back down, especially because the economic condition at the moment for a lot of our clients has caused them to pull back on ad spend, or their sales have suffered a little bit. But this is just another storm for us to weather. We've been through worse things for sure. And now back to the question when it comes to hiring and everything. I think the slow to hire, quick to fire has been something that I've stood by for a long time. And the other thing would be hiring around your weaknesses. So the things that I know that I'm not good at, I have to get people in place to compensate for. And the example I gave before, and I'll go over it again because I think it's such a good one, is finance, right? So I have someone on my team who has done bookkeeping and accounting and our company finance for years now. And I hired her, I think, part-time in maybe mid 2017, maybe even early 2017. And so she's still with us and is an incredible team member. And she does many more things than just finance now. She manages some accounts. She heads up some reporting. She gives me feedback and thoughts on company direction. I weigh her opinion very heavily in these kind of decisions because she's been with me for many years and she's seen a lot of things happen. So she's got that experience. But I at no point, Trudy, was like, man, I can't wait to start an Amazon ad agency and do invoicing and accounting all day. I never wanted to do that. Am I competent at it? Yeah, especially if I took maybe a couple more classes or use good software, I'd be able to hack it together. But we have fairly complicated books at this point with like money in for advertising, money out for payments, like software exchanges, amortized costs, equipment. It all adds up in complexity. And so I'm very glad that someone's there. Similarly, we talked about this before, but like traction, this idea of having an integrator and a visionary. I am very much like the visionary. I'm always coming up with ideas. I'm trying to jump into things with both feet. I see the diving end of the swimming pool and I say, all right, both feet, let's just go right now. But the person on my team who is the more of the integrator role is someone who always is going to say, hey, slow down. Let's build a process for this. Let's determine if we're really going to sink money into this. Is this a good idea? And so you need someone there who is a counterbalance to your weaknesses, or in some cases, your emphatic manic episodes, which is what I get into sometimes. So that's how that works. Those two people really stand out. And then of course we have like wonderful account managers who come to us with years of experience from other ad platforms like Google usually, and then they adopt their skills for Amazon because there's a lot of similarities, but there's also increasingly some major differences too. Does that answer the question? I think some of the hiring I left out, but those are some of the key aspects of how I think about it.
I think those are really important things to think about. I'm a fan of traction. That's a framework that Gino Wickman made popular. And that concept of integrator versus the visionary, somebody who comes up with the ideas, somebody who actually implements the ideas or goes, hang on, that's just such a silly idea. Don't even go there. And you have to share the power and make it work. It's a collaboration of equals that is really important to use, and to be able to get that balance it takes a lot of work and effort.
It's very much like a close relationship I have with both those people, my COO especially. It's not the kind of company that I lead and just unilaterally. I try to move away from that as much as I can and really open my ears and listen to people as best I can.
That's really important for people who are just getting started in terms of using advertising to sell their products on the Amazon space. Can you just share some of the things that you think are really important in terms of getting started? What are the kinds of things they have to think about before they start advertising? What are the sorts of things they need to think about after they actually get started with it?
There's a lot of considerations here, Trudy. So maybe the first one, the most important one, is who is advertising right for? Because there are a variety of companies that are selling on Amazon. Some of them are wholesalers. So that is to say they take product from someone else and Amazon is a distribution channel for them. Maybe the original company does not sell on Amazon because they don't have any interest in it. And then these people are wholesaling. There's people that are doing what's called retail arbitrage, which is where they buy things at stores or they buy things online and they arbitrage that and they make a margin based on that. And then there's what's called private label sellers or unique product sellers. And that's the vast majority of our clients, because the question that's at stake here for these different scenarios is buy box ownership. So each ASIN, unique Amazon number that's on Amazon's catalog online and the different marketplaces, can have multiple sellers. So you could have a product listing, an ASIN, that is 3 sellers. And those 3 sellers might share the buy box, but they might do so in like different percentages. So for most of the ad types, not all of them, but most of them, you have to have buy box ownership in order to run the ad. Because if you're spending money on a click or a view and sending someone to the page, you want to be the one who benefits from that sale. So when I say buy box, it's like that or yellow, orange color, depending on your vision. People say it's orange, people say it's yellow. On the right side of the page that says like, buy now. If you own that or you're the top person in the buy box, when someone hits that, they're going to be buying from you. So that's like an important prerequisite to nail down first. Like, who is advertising for? It is possible to advertise as a wholesaler, just have to be on top of that. And a lot of companies that do retail arbitrage, they usually don't advertise. That's not really in their business model. They don't have margins for it either. So that's the first thing. Margins not always the sexiest, most interesting part of e-commerce, but are absolutely key, foundational, pivotal thing for the business, which we can maybe dive into a bit later. That's who it's for. Now, what other considerations when you're going to do it is how good is the listing on Amazon? Amazon's terminology for this that we've adopted is actually called retail ready. So is it retail ready? Is that product listing the best that it can be? Is it fully optimized to the point where you are sending qualified traffic there, spending your hard-earned money to do? Is that traffic going to convert, and therefore you'll be able to see a profit at the end of the day, or at least a sales velocity increase and a keyword rank increase? These are the things that come along with Amazon advertising when it's done effectively, basically. So those are the 2 prerequisites we always keep in mind. And when we do audits for potential clients, we're always looking at retail readiness and buy box situation. And then we're going through the list of how are the actual campaigns optimized, because none of that stuff matters until you have those other things figured out. And then the last one, I guess, would be inventory. Do you have enough products to sell? It is occasional that we'll like do an audit and someone's like, it's going really well. Look at the inventory levels. And it's, you're going to run out of stock in 5 days. It doesn't matter. The listing's going to be either not live or you're not going to be the one that has a buy box anymore. Because of course, if you have no products, you no longer have the buy box typically.
That would be a horrible situation to be in. You've got all of this lovely sales, people wanting to buy and not enough inventory. So that's interesting. So those would be the 3 things to be getting yourself ready to start doing ads. Then can you just talk a little bit about what to be thinking about for just preparing the ads and what kind of things that you...
The biggest one is probably understanding the competitive landscape within Amazon. Everything you do on Amazon is in comparison to another seller or another offer on the marketplace. Think about the way an Amazon search results page or what Amazon calls a PDP, a product detail page, when you actually look at an individual product. Think about what that looks like. There are competitors and other offers all over both those pages. It's just covered in other things. Whereas on a Shopify site, you're going to have your product and then some nice shots and reviews. There's no competitors on there, obviously, right? But on Amazon, it's a hyper competitive, like dog eat dog marketplace. And so understanding where you sit in the like ladder of competition is really important. For example, is your product higher quality than the others because the materials are more expensive, they're nicer, or you put more time into developing it? Therefore, is it more expensive? Is it less expensive? Who should you be targeting? What keywords should you be picking up to go against? Because there are some that might be very appropriate for your product and others that might not be so appropriate because yours is like the cheaper option, which is fine. Amazon loves high velocity, cheaper options, but that also is like a threat to your margin and the sustainability of the business, right? You always, a fun point too. This is one of my more favorite parts of Amazon advertising. And we as a company in the last 2 years have really got into this more and more. Before we were just like in our lane with advertising, don't worry about it. Clients will do that. But now we're like very much into the creative side of it and we enjoy it. We have someone on the team who heads it up. We have a couple of creative people that execute on the details and we're pretty happy with results. This idea of retail readiness I talked about before is important to understand because that means that your product is ready to convert and it's going to be effective with advertising. But the other part of that is what Amazon now allows with creative, not only on product listings, but with ads too. So it used to be you run against the keyword and your product listing would show up and there it is. People would search for a keyword, they would see your listing. You couldn't even add a headline or anything specific. Now Amazon encourages us to use all kinds of creative. So high quality lifestyle images, high quality product shots like in use. Another one that they're a big fan of, which goes into sponsored brands and sponsored display ad types, which are 2 other ad types on the Amazon internal retail media platform. They really want to use videos. So anywhere from 10 to 25, I think 30 seconds is actually the limit, but we usually stick to 15 to 25 seconds. And those videos, they can be like Hollywood quality if you want to spend thousands of dollars on the video shoot, or maybe you have footage from an existing commercial that you've run or something like that, and you can cut that together so it's appropriate for Amazon. But actually, TikTok style, like portrait video like this also works because that's like authentic and real, and unboxing videos. Maybe some of those are UGC, like user generated content. All those things can be tested on the Amazon platform, and you got to see what works for your brand and your product category. Some of those video styles may be appropriate for other products and not others. So you got to test it out. But there is definitely a push on Amazon's end towards like higher quality creative, whether that's in video or in the different formats they make available now with advertising, which takes the form of like different size banners and images and everything like that. So they continue to expand that to the point where actually I'm not able to keep up with every single one of them. The people on my team that manage ads day to day, like they know that stuff like pretty well. But when I dive in there like every couple of weeks and I look at some of the new formats and stuff just to educate myself and stay current, I'm like, oh, wow, a new HD image format for that. And this one will look on mobile. And usually Amazon will give you a little preview. This is what it looks like on mobile. This is what it looks like on desktop. And those are important things to understand before you roll those out.
And basically being able to put together the thinking or even the research to decide what kind of ads are going to be effective, what kind of creatives are going to be effective. I think that's really important. So let's move now to the actual product description side of things. Do you want to just talk people through the top 2 or 3 things to be aware of so that the actual description just pops?
Yeah. So there's 2 sides to it too, Trudy. There's like getting the click and then there's getting the conversion, right? So there's 2 pieces to optimization. At least that's the way we look at it. And there's also this inherent tension between robots and humans, or robots and art. Either one of them works. I'll explain what I mean when I say that. But the first thing to understand is when you're advertising or when you're just even showing up organically on Amazon, there's a few key components that you want to have that allow you to get the click. So get the click means someone actually visits your product page, because obviously they can't buy unless they visit the page. And so the key considerations are like title, your primary image, and then whatever metadata that Amazon is willing to display on SERP. And with Amazon, that actually includes things like coupons, badges, like bestseller badge, maybe climate friendly badge, packaging friendly badge. They have all kinds of little badges and things that you can add on these days, or you get from being a high velocity selling product. So those are like the most important considerations for getting the click. And when it comes to the primary image, you can do a lot with it. But the most important things is to have it like super high resolution. So you want it to be like 4K. You want it to take up most of the space, like 85 to 90% of the space available. For many Amazon categories, they want it on like a neutral white background. I think, as I said to someone recently, it's like floating in space. It's like sitting on a blanket of white snow. But in the other images, when they actually click and they get to the product listing, that's where you can editorialize. That's where you can do like comparison images with competitors. You can do lifestyle shots. You could do images where you have like arrows and like things pointing to different features and benefits of the product itself. The important thing you want to do when someone actually lands on the page is try to make them feel like they're using the product like in real life, like they're at a store and they're picking it up and they're looking at it. Because think about your experience at a home and kitchen store. Like you might pick up a appliance and you can see exactly like what it's made of, like how it feels, what the weight of it is, like at the quality that you perceive from looking at it. You need to give people on your Amazon listing, excuse me. You need to give people on your Amazon listing that same experience. You want them to be able to imagine themselves using it, even though they're looking at it like in a digital fashion, not a physical one. And yeah, if you can convey that same level of information quality, then they're going to be like really happy to buy the product or like seriously consider it at least, because you're mimicking that like in-person experience, if you will.
And I'm smiling a little bit because I hesitated in the past to buy clothes on Amazon because you can't feel them, you can't pick them up, you can't feel them, and you can't tell how they're going to fit. So the more images that you can have that demonstrate how they fit on different body sizes or body shapes is going to help. It's definitely going to help. I think
that's a great call out. That's a great call out. I failed to mention that. But yeah, like apparel in particular, we have a decent amount of experience with apparel. One of the hardest categories on Amazon The returns are high, the sizing is quite subjective. And you're right, you need as many photos as possible with as many body types, sizes, whatever as possible. Of course, you have so many SKUs to like extra small all the way through triple XL if you're selling in America, of course. So there's a lot of variety there to get into. And I think that it is possible to do that. Apparel is obviously a huge thing on Amazon, but it is difficult. It's not one of the easy ones to do compared to a handheld kitchen blender. It doesn't matter like how big you are necessarily. That's going to work for pretty much everyone.
And you might be just looking to see what the reviews say about how robust it is. So can you just maybe talk just a little bit about the different types of tools that you use that people who are just getting started might be interested in investigating?
Sure. And let me preface this by something that is something I really like about the Amazon space, which is that most of the tools that are out there were created by companies or individuals that were selling on Amazon in the first place. So they actually are like making tools that they would want to use. And therefore, a lot of the tools they're a little bit like, it's like a cottage industry. It's a bit homegrown. So they have, maybe the interface isn't the best, but the functionality is like awesome. And the price is usually really good. There is more in the last 2 years of, I would say, private equity or just bigger money coming into the Amazon space and buying up some of these tools and combining them and professionalizing them, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Some of them have really improved thanks to that. But we use an interesting kind of like smattering of tools because this like cottage industry still is out there. The Amazon ecosystem, when it comes to what we know is like FBA and fulfillment by Amazon and this rise of this, it's all still like kind of 2014, 2015 since it's been around. So it's not that old really. Now, the tools that we use as an ad agency, the one that is probably the most useful and like the biggest one is called IntentWise. That's one of the many ad tools out there. But in order for us to do things like bid management, keyword negation and migration, campaign build out, analysis, reporting, that's all done through either IntentWise or the data that we actually pull out of IntentWise and put in our own database and address with what's called a business intelligence software. So that's something like Microsoft Power BI or like a Google Data Studio. We use a combination of different things actually, but that's like our main tool as an ad agency. We do a lot of management, of course, directly in the interface or through what's called bulk operations files, which is like a whole like spreadsheet format you can use with Amazon. But that's like the big tool that we use is like IntentWise. Then there's a bunch of other tools. These are some of the smaller like cottage tools that are run by like small teams that are usually very responsive to requests for like features and everything, which is why we like using them so much. But ZonGuru is one of them. That's really good for tracking competitors, keyword research, market tracking. It has some AI features in it too that they've recently added, which is pretty cool. Another one we like is called Zoof. We use that. It's a funny name, I know, but we use that for keyword rank tracking and some other research purposes. The last one I can think of just off the top of my head would be called Data Dive. And this one is really great for taking a list of competitors and doing a deep dive into their presence on Amazon. So all the keywords they're ranking for, what they're optimized for or not optimized for, where they're advertising. The report that comes out of that tool, you can spend hours like digging through it and really understanding your marketplace, which goes back to what I said earlier with like, when you're advertising, you have to understand where you sit in the competitive marketplace or in the marketplace in general, like what's your position. So that tool is quite useful for doing that. Those are a few I can think of. And then we have a smattering of other tools that are like Chrome extensions or one-off little utilities we bought for $15 5 years ago and we still use. There's like things like this that exist in the ecosystem. And that's part of what makes it fun, in my opinion.
Once again, that's one of the things that's the difference between visionary and somebody who's an integrator is that we want to just get out there and try those new tools and play around with them and see how they work. And basically you've got your person who's trying to hold you back going, hang on, wait a minute, do we really want to use that? So that's cool. But it's good to talk about the tools because sometimes somebody who's just getting started might not even know where to look or what to actually look for. We're going to have to bring things to a close, sadly. I'd love to keep talking to you about all these things because I think it's really interesting. But I'd like you, if you would please, if you could just share one piece of advice to somebody who's just getting into this space, what would be the one thing that you would say to them that they need to pay attention to?
Sure. I think with the rise, and this is like very topical because it's only since November that these tools like ChatGPT and now 4.0, which launched only some weeks ago, the rise of these tools combined with one trend that we've seen on Amazon, which is, first of all, 60% of sales that occur on Amazon are from 3P sellers. So it's not Amazon themselves, it's marketplace sellers and other businesses that are selling. In some marketplaces like Italy, that percentage is even higher. So Amazon is not selling that much in Italy. It's other marketplace sellers. Those two things combined with the rise of factories and manufacturers in China, Southeast Asia, and other countries in general, but let's just use China as an example because that's the majority of it. Those few factors combined are leading to a rise in what I would say is undifferentiated cheap products flooding the market. And so your advantage as someone who has a context for your culture and has product development and experience is to make a differentiated product. What is our advantage if a company from China that has really cheap sourcing abilities uses ChatGPT or similar to come up with product listings that look really good or come up with a brand that looks like quite good? Where is our moat? Where is our differentiation? So my advice to people, my counsel, and what I've seen our clients do is focus as much as you can on product development and branding. Those two things combined is what's going to be the moat around your business. That's going to differentiate you. And that is what is going to sell your product by itself. That's going to make your branding easier. That's going to make your ad costs lower because it's easier to sell a great product. And that's also going to allow you to take the brand off Amazon. A lot of the most successful companies we work with, they're Amazon first. And for many years, that was their main source of revenue. But they've managed to shift into an off Amazon sales channels too. And those make up like 30% of their revenue. And that in some cases is increasing, right? So they're selling more there. And that's usually higher margin. They own the customer relationship a bit better. And that to me is the ultimate objective for a lot of these companies. And you can do that if you have a strong brand and a really strong product catalog. If you're just another person selling a garlic press, which is like one of these classic joke examples on Amazon, that looks like everyone else's for the same price, it's going to be really hard for you to advertise effectively. It's going to be really hard for you to stand out. It's going to be really hard for you to run with good margins. So differentiation is the name of the game these days in building like a proper brand. 5 years ago on Amazon, that wasn't the case. You could use all the coolest new hacks. Maybe some of them were against TOS. Maybe some of them weren't. I'm definitely not suggesting doing anything that's black hat, but that was how people were gaming the system. That doesn't work anymore. That's not sustainable. You want to do something that's sustainable. So bigger upfront cost in terms of energy and time and effort, but much longer payoff over a better timeline, I would say. So that would definitely be my number one piece of advice or tip. Easier said than done, but worth considering.
That's really good advice. And I think that that's good advice for anyone with a business, a product, or even a digital product, whether it's physical or digital, is that the branding, the awareness, the unique aspect to what it is you do. I think that's really great advice. Brent, thank you so much. It's been great speaking with you. And I just really appreciate your patience just going through this whole process twice. And it's just been lovely. And I'm sure that people will find this very...
Thanks, Trudy. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to expand on these ideas.